So, Angela, do you want to take the next one?
The next one is W, pronounced in German as V.
V, yeah, V. So, aside from the alphabets, V is pronounced as V in German. Another one which is pronounced as as V, as something else when you see the alphabet, but it's pronounced as something else, is W. So W is pronounced as V. So which means if you see W, you pronounce it as a V. And if you see V, you pronounce it as an F. That's basically what it means. So I don't know if some of you might be familiar with the German brand, car brand, Volkswagen, that's VW. Of course, most English speakers, just like myself before I learned German, I used to pronounce VW as Volkswagen. That's the way I used to pronounce it. But the actual pronunciation is Volkswagen. So that's how it is pronounced. So VW is pronounced as V, and a typical example would be this word, wetter, which in English is what? Weather. That is your V in German. So foul is V, is how V is pronounced in German. So an example of that would be, anyone wants to try?
Feeling down, like
Feeling down. Feeling down, which is what? Thanks a lot. Yeah. Another example could be verloren, which is lost, or to lose. To lose or lost. So, Angela, do you want to take the next one?
The next one is W, pronounced in German as V.
V, yeah, V. So, aside from the alphabets, V is pronounced as V in German. Another one which is pronounced as V, as something else when you see the alphabet, but it's pronounced as something else, is W. So W is pronounced as V. So which means if you see W, you pronounce it as a V. And if you see V, you pronounce it as an F. That's basically what it means. So I don't know if some of you might be familiar with the German brand, car brand, Volkswagen, that's VW. Of course, most English speakers, just like myself before I learned German, I used to pronounce VW as Volkswagen. That's the way I used to pronounce it. But the actual pronunciation is Volkswagen. So that's how it is pronounced. So VW is pronounced as V, and a typical example would be this word, wetter, which in English is what? Weather. So the next one, Angela.
X, which
Yeah,
is pronounced as X.
X, exactly. So this one is a bit tricky. Of course, I know we know what this means already. You know, right? So just a quick explanation. This would not be pronounced as xenophobia. I'm sure some people would think this would be pronounced as xenophobia. You know, it's not. It's still in English. It's pronounced as xenophobia, right? You know, even in English, you don't even pronounce you pronounce the X as a Z, if I'm not mistaken, right? So this is pronounced as xenophobia, right? In English, am I correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So same thing in German. So the trick with this alphabet is the fact that most times, if it's starting a word, you don't pronounce it the way it sounds, except if it's standing alone. For instance, if I want to say iPhone X, I won't say iPhone X in German. I would say iPhone X, you know, or if I want to say X something or X that or X this, that's when I would use it as the way it sounds. But if it's starting a word, I would not say, for instance, xenophobic. No, it will still be xenophobic, xenophobic, xenophobic. That's how it's still pronounced. But however, for the fact that, or for the sake that we are trying to identify words that start with an X, we still have to use it as an example because despite the fact that it's borrowed, it still has a difference, a little difference in pronunciation. So it's pronounced as xenophobia, you know. So that's xenophobia in of course in English, you know. Yeah. And of course, English too also borrowed it, I think, from Latin or Greek, if I'm not mistaken. So languages they borrow from each other, you know. So yeah, so X usually would stand alone. So in the point at the point where this will stand alone would be, for instance, iPhone. When you use the word iPhone X, so we all know iPhone X, So in German, of course, it will be iPhone X. You pronounce it as iPhone X. That's how you pronounce it, you know. So that's if it stands alone, that's when most times you get to pronounce it as X. Because there are not so many, there are just few words. It's just like the alphabet C. There are few words that start with a C in German. The same way, the same thing too with X. There are few words that starts with X in German. I think it's even fewer than C, you know. So it's really, 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 really few words that start with it. So it's not common to find a word that starts with an X in German, you know. Then the next one would be, I'll leave that to Angela or Caroline to take, you know.
Okay. The next one is Y, which is Upsilon.
Upsilon, upsilon, upsilon. So whenever you see a word that starts with a Y in English, I mean in German, just know that it's pronounced as upsilon, and it means most times you likely pronounce it as a U, as a U or UP, upsilon. And a typical example would be so of course, oh, I'm still should be Y. I guess I got the spelling of psychology correctly, right, in English?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so this is a typical example. So based on this, English would not pronounce the P. The P is silent in English, which is psychology. Of course, German would be Sociologie. Sociologie. So you see, the Y there is not pronounced as a U. So sociologie, sociologie. So anywhere you see a Y in a German word, you know you have to pronounce it as a U. That's why it's upsilon, upsilon, upsilon. So sociology, which is psychology, so that's one typical example. So most times, when one is learning alphabets, is the sound you pay attention to, not necessarily the alphabet itself. So in this case, despite the fact that Y is pronounced, Y is Y, can be written as Y, but the pronunciation is what matters. So the pronunciation is upsilon. So, and this is a word with Y in it, and is pronounced as sociology. So that's giving you an idea of how Y sound. And Y is not, words that start with Y are not common at all in German. They are not common, But of course, we have, I think, sometimes the German now these days, they now also use the English word as yam. They also use yam too. I don't know if you know yam. Some of Carol, I'm not sure Carol knows yam. East Africans might not know yam.
At least for us, I know.
So you know it.
Yeah.
Okay. So in a case like this, when it is borrowed directly, you still pronounce it as a Y straight away. But if it's not a borrowed, if it's not directly borrowed, you pronounce it, if whether it's in the middle of a word or is starting a word, which hardly you would find. You hardly find a German word that starts with a Y. It's hard. Most times it's either borrowed or is borrowed and then spelled in a way that makes it look German, just like sociology. But most times it's difficult for you to find a word that starts with a Y. I think it's even more difficult than X, So if you check German dictionaries, you find maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe maximum 10 words. And most of them are usually borrowed when you see them. in a German dictionary, or maybe when you see them, some of the words probably would have been outdated or they are not used anymore. So these are some of the words that are used in pronounced in German this way that you have to pay attention to. So then the last but not least is, of course, letter Z. This is the one that usually give a lot of people challenge to pronounce, because it's tricky, but at the same time, it's also not so difficult to pronounce. So the alphabet Z in German is pronounced as set. So first of all, what you need to do is, as you can see, there's a T first, and then just if you separate them, you can separate them this way. So just the word set, like in English, the English word set, you can then pronounce the T first, and then you pronounce the set afterwards. So, but of course, you pronounce it together, so set. So you are pronouncing all at once, set. So basically, this is how you pronounce Z, set. So an example of set in a word, an example. Want to try? Angela?
Sight.
Exactly. Sight. And that is time. Then we also have from Zeit as well, we have Zeitung, which is newspaper. We also have Zusammen, which is together. Zusammen. So you can pay attention to the fact that if you remember, I made a reference to why a word sounded like a T, right? I can't remember where exactly again. Okay, yeah. Hertz. You see, you can make reference to the alphabet Z now better, because Z is pronounced as set, which makes it very obvious that T is dominant. So that's why the word for heart in German is pronounced as Herz. So that's the reason for that. So Z is set. Examples are Zeit, which is time. Then we have Zeitung, which is newspaper. We have Zusammen, which is together.